The massive station hung in the void between two burning stars. Its metal corridors had witnessed countless debates, peace treaties, and declarations that shaped the galaxy for 10,000 years. Today, those ancient walls would hear something different. Today, they would hear humanity's refusal to die quietly. Ambassador Haijin stood alone in the center of the council chamber. Around her, in a perfect circle, sat representatives of 14 alien species. Each one looked down at her from elevated platforms. The design was deliberate. It made anyone standing in the center feel small, insignificant, easy to dismiss. For 43 years, human ambassadors had stood in this spot and accepted whatever the council decided. Not today. Magistrate Velthan rose from his seat. He was massive, easily 3 times Haijin's height, with a body covered in dark chitinous plates. His compound eyes reflected the chamber lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors. When he spoke, his voice echoed through translation devices built into the walls. "The council has reached a decision regarding the human question," Velthan said. His mandibles clicked between words. "Your species has violated the boundaries set for all newcomer races. You have established colonies and protected zones. You have expanded your territory at a rate that threatens the established order." Haijin wanted to laugh. Protected zones. The council meant star systems they had marked on ancient maps, but never settled, never used, never even visited in 1,000 years. Systems that sat empty while younger species needed worlds to grow? "We have broken no laws," Haijin said calmly. "Every colony we established was in unclaimed space, verified through proper channels." "Unclaimed by your primitive understanding," another council member spoke up. This one looked like a crystal formation given life, refracting light into rainbow patterns. "The systems you invaded were reserved for future expansion by superior civilizations." "Reserved for 10,000 years?" Haijin asked. "While species die out because they have nowhere to grow?" Velthan's mandibles clacked sharply, a sign of irritation. "You speak of matters beyond your comprehension, human. But territorial expansion is not the council's primary concern. Your technological advancement is—" The chamber fell silent. Haijin felt her stomach tighten. This was the real issue. "In 43 years," Velthan continued, "humanity has reverse-engineered council technology at an alarming pace. You have developed weapons, shields, and faster-than-light drives that took other species millennia to create. You steal our designs. You improve upon them. You threaten to upset the balance of power that has kept peace in this galaxy since before your ancestors climbed down from trees." "We learn quickly," Haijin said. "Is that a crime?" "It is a threat," Velthan declared. "The council cannot allow a primitive, aggressive species to achieve technological parity with civilizations that have evolved beyond war. Beyond violence, beyond the savage instincts that still drive your kind. Beyond violence." Haijin had seen the council's history files. She knew about the wars they had fought, the species they had wiped out, civilizations they had crushed when those societies refused to submit. The council preached peace while sitting on a mountain of bones. "The council has prepared terms," Velthan announced. "Humanity will dismantle 90% of its colonial holdings. You will return to your home system in 10 approved worlds. You will submit to technological regression protocols, surrendering all advanced weapons and faster-than-light vessels. You will accept permanent status as a junior member with no voting rights on council matters." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You have 30 standard days to comply. Failure to accept these terms will result in unified military action against all human holdings." Haijin looked around the chamber. 14 species, hundreds of worlds, thousands of years of accumulated power. Against humanity's 400 colonies and a fleet that was barely a century old. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had built a civilization from nothing, who had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and extinction events, who had looked at the stars and decided they belonged there. She thought about her daughter, living on New Incheon Colony, about all the children born among the stars who had never seen Earth but called humanity's new worlds home. "No," Haijin said simply. The chamber erupted. Alien voices overlapped through translation systems, creating a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. "You refuse?" Velthan's voice, cut through the noise. "You understand what this means?" "I understand perfectly," Hyjin replied. "You're asking humanity to commit slow suicide, to trap ourselves in a cage and throw away the key, to condemn future generations to serving as the Council's labor force while you control the galaxy?" "We offer you survival," Velthan said. "You offer us extinction with extra steps," Hyjin shot back. "And humanity doesn't do extinction well. We've faced it before. Ice covered our world. Plagues killed millions. We fought wars that should have ended us. And every single time, we survived. Not because we were stronger or smarter than our enemies, but because we refused to quit." She turned slowly, making eye contact with each council member. "So here's my answer. Humanity will not dismantle our colonies. We will not regress our technology. We will not accept second-class status in a galaxy we have every right to explore. If the Council wants to take what we've built, you're welcome to try. But I promise you, the sit will cost you everything." Velthan rose to his full height. "Then the Council declares a state of war between the unified forces of the Galactic Council and the human species. All members are required to contribute forces to the peacekeeping action. We will remove the human threat permanently," a vote was called. 14 voices said yes. Earth's vote was nullified. Hyjin left the chamber with her head high. She didn't run. She didn't show fear. She walked through corridors lined with alien soldiers, who watched her with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Captain Deho waited at the docking port where her shuttle sat. He was old for a ship captain, with gray hair and scars across his face from a dozen battles. His ship, the Soul's Promise, hung in space beyond the station. "They did it," Deho asked. "They did it," Hyjin confirmed. "Fools," Deho muttered. He pulled out a communication device and sent an encrypted message to Earth. Then he looked at Hyjin. "You know we can't win this war. Not the way they think wars should be fought." "I know," Hyjin said. "That's why we won't fight it their way." Through the viewport, they watched as Council warships began assembling. Hundreds at first, then thousands. The largest fleet ever gathered in galactic history. All of it aimed at humanity. Deho smiled grimly. "They have no idea what they've started." No, Hyjin agreed. "They really don't." The Council fleet moved through space like a slow tide of metal and fire. 40,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of technology refined over millennia. Fleet Commander Zethanara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colonies lay ahead like fruit ready for harvest. "They will surrender," his tactical officer said. "They must. No species has ever faced such overwhelming force." Zethanara nodded. He had fought in 17 wars over his 3,000 years of life. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. Humanity would be no different. They would see the fleet, calculate the odds, and accept the inevitable. The countdown reached 72 hours before the deadline. Then everything changed. The first reports came from the Outer Rim, a mining facility on Theta 7. It's gone silent. Then a supply depot near the Vega cluster stopped responding. Communication relays began failing across 6 different sectors. Meteor strikes. Someone suggested 17 facilities at once. Zethanara's tactical officer looked puzzled. Across 12 systems? The answer came an hour later when they finally reached one of the silent facilities. The mining station hung in space, completely intact, but every piece of equipment had been stripped away. Ore processors, fusion reactors, automated mining drones all gone. On the station wall, written in their own language, was a message. "You wanted war? Now learn what that means." Admiral Biora watched the reports flood in from her command center deep inside an asteroid base. Her face remained neutral as she studied the tactical map, but inside she felt a fierce satisfaction. 19 targets hit successfully, her operations officer reported. Supply chain disruption estimated at 18%. Casualties on our side? 0, Biora said. Proceed to Phase 2. She had spent 40 years in military service. She had studied every war in human history, from ancient battles fought with spears to the orbital strikes that nearly destroyed Earth during the resource wars. She knew one truth that the Council had forgotten. Wars weren't won by the strongest army. They were won by the army that could keep fighting, The Council had better weapons, better shields, better ships, but they had grown comfortable. They hadn't fought a real war in 5,000 years. They had peacekeeping actions. They had police operations. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by their rules, Captain. Deho led the raid on the shipyard at Kepler Station. His ship, Sol's Promise, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Around him, 19 other human vessels appeared, all of them fast frigates designed for hit-and-run attacks. No Council warships in range, his sensor officer reported. The shipyard is defended by automated systems only. They don't think they need to defend it, Deho said. They think we're too primitive to reach this far into their territory. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships, weapons free. Primary target is their manufacturing database. Secondary targets are construction equipment. We're not here to destroy the station. We're here to steal everything they know. The attack lasted 14 minutes. Human missiles punched through shields designed to stop different types of weapons. Boarding teams cut through airlocks and fought past security drones. And in the station's central computer core, Technician Ji Woo worked her magic. She was young, barely 25, with quick hands and a quicker mind. The Council's quantum encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. They had spent 10,000 years perfecting it. Ji-Woo broke it in 4 minutes. Got it, she said, downloading terabytes of data. Ship designs, manufacturing processes, material specifications. Hour. Deho asked, watching over her shoulder. They assumed only species with advanced mathematics could crack their encryption, Ji-Woo explained, fingers flying across her terminal. But their mathematics is old. Refined, yes, but old. We've been developing new approaches to quantum computing for decades. They stopped innovating 5,000 years ago. Alarms blared through the station. Council reinforcements were arriving. Time to go, Deho ordered. The human ships vanished into faster than light, leaving the shipyard intact but violated. And now humanity had the keys to the Council's technological kingdom. General Taeyang led the ground assault on Supply Depot Gamonine. His soldiers moved through the facility like ghosts, using stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured Council equipment. They didn't kill the alien workers they found. They just locked them in their own quarters and took everything that wasn't bolted down. Food synthesizers, medical supplies, fuel cells, ammunition, even the spare parts in the maintenance bays. This is theft, not war, one of his lieutenants said. This is how you win wars, Taeyang corrected. The Council's fleet needs fuel, ammunition, and supplies. Every depot we hit means their ships can't operate at full capacity. Every communication relay we destroy means they can't coordinate. We're not fighting their warships. We're fighting their logistics. He had learned this lesson studying ancient Earth history. Powerful armies had fallen because they couldn't feed their soldiers, couldn't supply their equipment, couldn't maintain their supply lines. The Council thought war was about who had the biggest guns. Humans knew war was about who could outlast the enemy. The Council fleet reached New Incheon 3 weeks into the campaign. The colony world hung in space like a jewel. Blue oceans and green continents visible from orbit. Zethanara prepared his forces for battle. Surely the humans would defend their colonies. Surely they would make a stand. The fleet descended toward the planet's surface. Weapons ready, they found nothing. Every city was empty. Every installation was abandoned. The entire population of 17 million people had vanished.
Where are they?
Zethanara demanded. His answer came from underground. Millions of automated defense drones erupted from hidden bunkers. Kinetic mines activated across the entire surface. The atmosphere itself had been seeded with nano-dash explosives. New Incheon wasn't a colony anymore. It was a trap. The Council fleet lost 8,000 ships, capturing an empty world. The survivors retreated to orbit, bleeding from wounds that should have been impossible for primitive human weapons to inflict. Dr. Subin watched from her hidden laboratory on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Her team had spent 5 years developing the weapons now tearing through Council ships. Plasma warheads, quantum disruptors, kinetic accelerators that could punch through any shield. The Council's shields are designed to stop energy weapons and conventional missiles, she explained to her assistants. So we built weapons that don't work like anything they've seen before. We innovate. They refine. Innovation beats refinement every single time. Admiral Biora received the casualty reports from New and Chin. 8,000 council ships destroyed. Human casualties, 0. The colony population was safe, evacuated to hidden facilities and other systems. She opened a communication channel to Earth Command. Phase 1 is complete, she reported. The Council controls 38 of our colonies. All of them are empty and fortified. Their fleet is scattered, their supply lines are broken. And they still haven't figured out that we're not fighting the war they prepared for. On Earth, the military command reviewed the reports. Humanity had lost no core systems. The Council had lost 18% of their logistics network. The war was barely a month old. Already the tide was turning. But Fleet Commander Zethanara refused to accept reality. He sent a message to the Council, urging them to authorize an attack on Earth itself. If they could take humanity's homeworld, surely the humans would surrender. The Council agreed. They had no idea. They were making the worst mistake in galactic history. The Council fleet assembled at the edge of Earth's solar system. 9,000 warships, the largest strike force ever directed at a single world. Fleet Commander Zethanara stood on his bridge and stared at the blue planet on his view screen. Humanity's birthplace. Their heart? Take this, and the war would end. All ships, he commanded, proceed to Earth orbit. Destroy defensive installations. Prepare for planetary assault. The fleet moved forward like a wave of metal death. They never reached orbit. Earth's moon erupted with weapons fire. Not just surface batteries. The moon itself had been hollowed out and converted into the largest fortress humanity had ever built. Thousands of missile silos. Hundreds of plasma cannons. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as space. Debris suddenly came online, and then the fracture missiles launched. Dr. Subin had spent 2 years developing them in secret. They were her masterpiece and her nightmare. Each missile didn't just explode, created a quantum entanglement field that spread through any matter it touched. Ships caught in the blast didn't just die. They were transformed into expanding debris fields that made space itself impassable. The first wave of Council ships hit the defensive perimeter and simply ceased to exist. Where there had been warships, now there were clouds of quantum-locked debris that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Any ship that tried to pass through the fields was shredded by fragments moving at relativistic speeds. Zethanara ordered, "Pull back and regroup." But there was no pulling back. Admiral Biora had planned for this moment. Human ships, faster and more maneuverable than Council vessels, had circled behind the attacking fleet. Now they launched their own fracture missiles, cutting off the retreat routes. The Battle of Earth lasted for days. The Council fleet fought with desperate courage, but courage meant nothing against physics. Human weapons had turned the space around Earth into a killing field. Council ships that avoided the quantum debris fields ran into minefields. Ships that avoided the mines ran into stealth carriers that appeared from nowhere, launched their payloads, and vanished again. Commander Sang-woo led the Ghost Fleet from his carrier, the Phantom Wind. His ships used technology stolen from the Council's own, research cloaking fields that bent light and sensor waves around their hulls. They could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy could respond. Target the command ships, Sang-woo ordered. Cut off their coordination. His fighters screamed through the chaos, targeting the Council's flag vessels. Without their commanders, the alien fleets fell into disorder. Ships collided with each other, trying to retreat. Others broke formation and were picked off by human destroyers. Technician Ji Woo worked from a control station on Earth, coordinating the defensive systems. She had cracked the Council's communication codes, which meant she could hear every order Zethanara gave. More than that, she could feed false information into their systems. Their fleet thinks reinforcements are coming from Sector 7, she reported. They're repositioning to defend against an attack that doesn't exist. Keep them confused, Admiral Biora commanded. Every second they're disorganized is another second we can bleed them. On the 4th day, Zethanara looked at his tactical display and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3,000 years. Fear. He had arrived with 9,000 ships. Now he had fewer than 2,000 operational vessels. The humans had turned his fleet into scrap metal. "Sound retreat," he ordered. "All ships. Emergency faster than light jump. Leave the system immediately." The Council fleet fled Earth, leaving behind thousands of dead ships and hundreds of thousands of dead crew. They had come to break humanity's spirit. Instead, humanity had broken their fleet. But Admiral Bura wasn't finished. Launched the counteroffensive. She ordered human fleets that had been hiding throughout the galaxy suddenly went on the attack. Not against Council military targets, against their refuge worlds. The secret colonies where Council leaders had thought they were safe. General Tai Yang led the ground assault on the Kresh refuge world of Haven. It was supposed to be a paradise, hidden in a nebula where sensors couldn't reach it, but Ji Wu had found it in the stolen Council databases. Taeyong's soldiers dropped from orbit in stealth pods. They landed in the forests outside the main city and moved quickly through the trees. The Kresh guards never saw them coming. The assault was surgical. Human soldiers used non-lethal weapons, stunning aliens and securing facilities without killing civilians. But the message was clear. Nowhere was safe. No one was safe. "We could have killed every Kresh on this planet," Taeyang told the captured Council administrator. "We didn't. But now, you know we can reach you anywhere. Tell your leaders. Tell them what happened here." Similar raids happened across 14 Council refuge worlds in a single day. Human soldiers appeared, struck their targets, and vanished. They left property damage but few casualties. The psychological impact was devastating. Council diplomat Extinction was a being of living crystal, ancient and wise. He had served on the Council for 2,000 years and had seen countless conflicts. But he had never seen anything like this. In 6 months, humanity had gone from defensive to dominant. They had lost no core worlds. The Council had lost a quarter of their invasion fleet and countless support facilities. He opened a secret communication channel to Ambassador Hai Jin.
"We need to discuss terms,"
Extinction said. Hai Jin met him in neutral space, aboard a station that belonged to neither side. She came alone, without guards or weapons. Extinction found that more intimidating than if she had brought an army. "The Council is prepared to offer a ceasefire," Extinction began. "We will recognize humanity's right to the colonies you currently hold. We will restore trade relations." "We will know," Hai Jin interrupted. Extincion's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. "You haven't heard the full terms." "I don't need to," Hai Jin said. "Here are humanity's terms. The Council surrenders unconditionally. All member species withdraw their forces from human space. You pay reparations for every human life lost, every colony damaged. And Magistrate Velthin stands trial for crimes against sapient species." "That's impossible," Extinction said. "The Council will never accept such humiliation." "Then the war continues," Hai Jin said simply. "And we will show you what total war means." She leaned forward, her eyes hard as steel. "Your people live in cities that have stood for 10,000 years. You have art and culture and history you consider priceless. You think you know what war is because you fought battles in space. But you've never experienced what humans call total war. You've never seen your cities burn. You've never watched your civilization crumble. You've never faced an enemy that will destroy everything you are just to prove they can't be conquered." She stood up.
"I'll go back to the Council."
"Tell them they have one chance to end this peacefully. If they refuse, we will teach them the lessons we learned in our own history. We will show them what happens when you threaten humanity with extinction." Extinction watched her leave, his crystalline mind processing the implications. Humans weren't bluffing. They had already proven they could reach anywhere, strike anyone. If they decided to escalate from surgical strikes to total destruction, he returned to the Council and delivered the message. The reaction was divided. Half the member species wanted peace at any cost. The other half, led by Velthin, refused to surrender to what they still called a primitive species. The Council split. 11 species sued for peace. 3 species, the Krish, the Sauroids, and the Viridians, chose to continue the war, and humanity as promised. Showed them what total war really meant. The war changed after the Council split. 11 species accepted humanity's peace terms and withdrew their forces. They signed treaties, paid reparations, and began the long process of rebuilding relationships. But three species refused to surrender: the Kresh Dominion, Sauroid Empire, and the Viridian Collective. Admiral Biora called a meeting of Earth's military leadership. The holographic conference room filled with admirals, generals, and intelligence officers from across human space. "The council is broken," Biora said. "But three civilizations still want to fight. They believe they can outlast us. They're wrong. It's time to show them what humans do to enemies who threaten our existence." She pulled up star maps, showing Kresh, Sauroid, and Viridian territories. "We're not fighting for territory anymore. We're fighting for survival. And that means we use every weapon we have." Dr. Subin stood in her laboratory on Europa, staring at the vial in her hand. Inside was the Cascade virus, a weapon so terrible she had hoped never to use it. The virus was designed specifically to target Kresh biology. The Kresh weren't individuals, they were a hive mind. Billions of bodies connected through biological quantum communication. The Cascade virus would sever those connections. "If we deploy this," Subin said to her team, "the Kresh civilization will collapse. Their hive mind will shatter. They'll become individuals without the ability to reconnect. It's not death, but it might be worse." "They chose to keep fighting," one of her assistants said. "They rejected peace." Subin closed her eyes. She thought about the human colonies the Kresh had destroyed. The civilians killed in orbital bombardments. The children who would never grow up because aliens decided humanity shouldn't exist. "Deploy the virus," she ordered. The Cascade virus spread through Kresh space like invisible fire. It was carried in microscopic particles that attached to ships, cargo, even radio transmissions. Within 3 weeks, every Kresh world was infected. The hive mind that had ruled the Dominion for 8,000 years began to fracture. Kresh soldiers suddenly couldn't coordinate their attacks. Workers forgot how to operate their factories. Scientists lost access to their collective knowledge. Billions of Kresh found themselves alone inside their own minds for the first time in their species. History: the Dominion collapsed into chaos. Not because humans destroyed them with weapons, but because humans had removed the one thing that made them strong. The Sauroid Empire faced a different weapon. The Sauroids were an ancient species, powerful and proud. But they had a weakness. Their reproduction rate had been declining for centuries. Each generation produced fewer eggs than the last. They were slowly dying out. And they knew it. Dr. Subin's Biological Warfare Division studied captured Sauroid genetic material and found the cause: a genetic drift that occurred naturally over millions of years. They also found they could accelerate it. The bioweapon was released into Sauroid agricultural systems. It didn't kill anyone. It simply made the genetic drift happen faster. Within a year, Sauroid birth rates dropped to nearly zero. Within 2 years, their species faced extinction not from human weapons, but from their own biology failing. The Sauroid Emperor contacted Earth Command, his voice heavy with defeat. "You've condemned us to extinction," he said. "You condemned yourselves," Admiral Bora replied. "You had the chance for peace. You chose war. Now you pay the price." "At least when we die fighting," the Emperor said. Bo corrected. "You die quietly, watching your civilization fade away. That's what happens when you threaten humanity. We don't just beat you, we erase you." Viridians were beings of pure energy, held together by quantum coherence. They thought their nature made them invulnerable to human weapons. They were wrong. Human scientists had been studying quantum physics for centuries. When they captured Viridian prisoners early in the war, they learned how the aliens maintained their coherent energy patterns. And where there was coherence, there could be disruption. The quantum dampeners were elegant weapons. Small devices that could be planted on Viridian worlds and stations. When activated, they created fields that disrupted quantum coherence. Viridians caught in these fields simply stopped existing, their energy patterns collapsing into random radiation. Commander Sang-Woo led the deployment of dampeners across Viridian space. His Ghost fleet moved silently through their systems, planting devices on every major installation. When all the dampeners were in place, humanity sent one final message to the Viridian leadership: "Surrender now, or we activate the dampeners and your entire species dies in an instant. The Viridians didn't believe the threat was real. They activated their weapons to attack one more human colony. Songwu activated the Nemners. 3 billion Viridians died in the span of 5 seconds. Their energy patterns collapsed simultaneously across 40 worlds. The survivors, those who had been in shielded ships or far from the dampeners, suddenly found themselves nearly extinct. The Viridian leadership surrendered within the hour, while the military fought. Captain Mina led a different mission. She commanded a special operations team tasked with hunting down war criminals. And at the top of her list was Magistrate Velthan. Velthan had fled when the council collapsed. Intelligence suggested he was hiding on a moon in the outer territories, protected by loyal Kresh soldiers who hadn't been affected by the cascade.
Iris.
Yet Mina's team spent 3 months tracking him. They followed supply shipments, intercepted communications, and slowly narrowed down his location. When they found him, they struck fast and hard. The raid happened at dawn. Human soldiers in powered armor stormed Velthan's compound, overwhelming his guards in minutes. Mina herself kicked down the door to Velthan's chamber. The magistrate stood in the center of the room, his massive form surrounded by bodyguards. He looked at Mina with his thousand-eyed gaze. "You cannot seriously believe you can put me on trial," Velthan said. "I am a council magistrate. I am above your primitive justice." "You were a council magistrate," Mina corrected. "The council doesn't exist anymore. You're just a war criminal now." The fight was brief. Human weapons designed to punch through ship armor made short work of Velthan's bodyguards. The magistrate himself was hit with a neural stunner that dropped his massive body to the floor. "You're coming with us," Mina said. "You're going to answer for every crime the council committed. Not just against humans, but against every species you conquered and oppressed." Medical officer Young Mi had spent the war documenting council atrocities. She traveled to occupied worlds, interviewed survivors, and collected evidence. What she found horrified her. The council hadn't just attacked humanity. For 10,000 years, they had quietly eliminated species they considered threats. Civilizations that advanced too quickly were sabotaged. Worlds that refused to submit were sterilized. The council preached peace while committing genocide. Youngmi compiled all the evidence into a database. When the war ended, she presented it to the surviving council species. Many of them refused to believe it at first. Their perfect, peaceful civilization couldn't have done such things. But the evidence was undeniable. Recordings, documents, witnesses. The council had been built on a foundation of quiet atrocities. The revelation shattered what remained of council authority. The species that had sued for peace realized they had been serving monsters. Some of them begged humanity for forgiveness. Others demanded the right to try their own leaders for crimes against their own populations. 14 months after the war began, it was over. The Kresh Dominion had fractured into hundreds of independent hive states. The Sauroid Empire was dying, its population too small to maintain their civilization. The Viridians had lost 90% of their species and existed only on human sufferance, and Velthan sat in a cell. Waiting for trial, Ambassador Hyjin visited him once. She stood outside his containment field and studied the being who had declared war on humanity. "Why?" she asked. "You could have let us grow. We weren't a threat to you." "You were the greatest threat," Velthan said softly. "Not because you were strong, because you wouldn't stop." Every species has limits. Points where they say, "This is enough, we're satisfied." You humans have no limits. You always want more. You always push further. If we let you grow unchecked, eventually you would surpass us. Eventually, you would rule the galaxy. We had to stop you while we still could. "So you tried to genocide us," Hyjin said. "We tried to cage you," Velthan corrected. "We failed. Now we pay the price." Hyjin turned to leave, then paused. "You were right about one thing. Humans don't stop. We don't accept limits. But you were wrong about what that means. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be free to find our place in it. You could have been our allies. Instead, you became our victims." She walked away, leaving Velthan alone with the consequences of his choices. 20-6 months after the Council declared war on humanity, the war was over. But the galaxy would never be the same. The trial of Velthin and his co-conspirators took place on Earth, in the same chambers where the United Nations once met. Representatives from 68 species attended, including many who had fought against humanity. They came to witness justice, perhaps to understand how humanity would use its newfound power. Velthin stood in the center of the chamber, his massive form restrained by force fields. Around him, evidence of his crimes played on holographic displays. Not just his war crimes against humanity, but thousands of years of atrocities committed by the council he had led. Ambassador Hyjin served as first prosecutor. She presented each piece of evidence calmly, without emotion. The recordings of council meetings where they discussed eliminating dangerous species, the documents showing calculated genocides disguised as natural disasters, the testimony of survivors from dozens of civilizations that the council had destroyed. The council claimed to bring peace, Hyjin said, but their peace was built on fear and control. Any species that grew too strong, too independent, too innovative was eliminated. The council's 10,000 years of stability came at the cost of countless civilizations that never got the chance to reach the stars. Velthin didn't deny the charges. How could he? The evidence was overwhelming. "We maintained order," he said simply. "The galaxy is chaos without guidance. Without the Council's oversight, younger species would have destroyed each other, or they would have thrived," Hyjin replied. "We'll never know, because you never gave them the chance. You decided you had the right to control every civilization in the galaxy. That's not justice. That's tyranny." The verdict came after 3 weeks of testimony. Velthin and 47 other council leaders were found guilty of crimes against sapient life. The sentence was life imprisonment, not death. Humanity wanted them to live, to watch as the galaxy moved forward without them. While the trials proceeded, the real work of rebuilding began. Admiral Buara retired from active duty and began writing the definitive history of the war. Military academies across the galaxy studied her tactics, learning the lessons of asymmetric warfare. "The Council made a fundamental mistake," Buara wrote. "They thought war was about who had the biggest guns. But war is about who can keep fighting when everything seems lost. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the refusal to surrender. Humanity didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we understood what victory required." General Taeyong took charge of training the unified defense forces of the new galactic order. Former enemies learned to fight alongside humans, adopting tactics that had destroyed the Council's forces. "I teach them that honor in war is a luxury," Taeyong explained to his instructors. "When your survival is at stake, you use every advantage. You strike fast, retreat when necessary, and never fight on your enemy's terms." These species spent 10,000 years learning refined warfare. We're teaching them how to win. Dr. Subin destroyed most of her weapons research. She kept detailed records, but the actual samples were burned, vaporized, or shot into the sun. She had created weapons that could destroy entire civilizations, and the knowledge terrified her. "I did what was necessary," she told the review board investigating her work, "but that doesn't make it right. We proved humans can create weapons more terrible than anything the galaxy has seen. Now we have to prove we're wise enough not to use them unless we have no choice." The board sealed most of her research in classified archives, accessible only with approval from multiple governments. Some knowledge, they decided, was too dangerous to share freely. Commander Sang-woo's Ghost Fleet became the guardians of the new order. His ships patrolled the borders of known space, watching for external threats. The cloaking technology that had made them so effective in war now served a peacekeeping role. "We fought this war so younger species wouldn't have to," Sang-woo told his crews. "Now we make sure no one else tries what the Council attempted. We're the watchers in the dark, the shield that protects the galaxy from threats it doesn't even know exist." But not everyone celebrated humanity's victory. The Kresh, fractured into hundreds of independent hive states, struggled to rebuild. Each hive state was now isolated, unable to communicate with others the way they once had. Some adapted and found new purpose as individuals. Others descended into madness, unable to cope with the silence in their minds. Refugee coordinator Hyunwoo managed the humanitarian efforts. Billions of aliens displaced by the war needed shelter, food, and medical care. Many of them ended up on human worlds protected by the very species they had tried to destroy. "It's strange," Haiyan Wu said to his staff. "We're helping the people who wanted us dead. But that's what separates us from the Council. They eliminated threats. We try to understand them." The Ceroid Empire was dying. Their birth rate never recovered from the bioweapons effects. The few remaining Soroids accepted human medical assistance, but everyone knew it was too late. Within 2 generations, their species would be extinct. The last Soroid Emperor met with Ambassador Haijin one final time. "We brought this on ourselves," he admitted. "But I ask one thing. Remember us? Remember that we once ruled 1,000 worlds. Remember that we built wonders that lasted millions of years. Don't let our legacy be only the mistake of fighting you." "We'll remember," Haijin promised. "We'll preserve your history, your art, your culture. Future generations will know what the Ceroid Empire achieved before it fell." The Viridians survived, but barely. The few million who remained alive pledged themselves to human protection. They became advisors and scientists, sharing their knowledge freely in exchange for the right to exist. 1. Viridian scholar named Lux worked with technician Zhe Wu, now a leading researcher in quantum technologies. "Your species frightens us," Lux admitted. "Not because you're violent, but because you're relentless. You survived ice ages, plagues, and your own worst instincts. Then you came to the stars and survived us. What could possibly stop you?" "Ourselves," Giwu said quietly. "The same thing that almost destroyed us a dozen times before. That's why we need species like yours around, to remind us what we could become if we're not careful." The new Galactic Assembly held its first session 2 years after the war ended. 68 species sent representatives, including the 11 former council members who had sued for peace. The charter they signed was nothing like the old council's rules. Every species, no matter how young or primitive, had equal voting rights. No species could claim protected territories unless they actively used them. Technology sharing was encouraged, not restricted. And most importantly, any attempt at genocide or forced regression would be met with unified military response. Ambassador Haijin was elected first director of the assembly. She stood before the gathered representatives and delivered the opening address. "The old council ruled through control and fear," she began. "They claimed their way brought peace, but it only brought stagnation. Species that could have achieved greatness were held back or eliminated. That ends today." She gestured to the diverse crowd of aliens before her. "The new Galactic Assembly is built on different principles. We believe every species has the right to grow, to explore, to reach their potential. We believe diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. We believe that cooperation works better than domination." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But make no mistake, this new order will be defended. The weapons humanity created during the war still exist. The tactics we developed still work. We hope never to use them again. But if any species tries to return to the old ways, if anyone threatens genocide or forced subjugation, they will learn what humans do to threats against peace." The charter was signed by all 68 species. A new era began. 20 years later, Admiral Deho stood in the memorial gardens of New Inchen. The colony had been rebuilt, bigger and more beautiful than before. The gardens stretched for kilometers, filled with plants from 100 different worlds. And at the center stood the memorial wall. Carved with the names of every human who died in the war, a young Krish approached him. She was part of the new generation, born after the Cascade virus shattered the hive mind. She could never know the collective consciousness her ancestors experienced, but she had learned to thrive as an individual. "Admiral," she said, "I studied the war in school. I don't understand something. Why did you fight so hard? The Council's terms weren't death. You would have survived." Deho looked at the memorial, at the thousands of names carved in stone. Then he looked at the city beyond, where humans and aliens lived and worked together. "Survival isn't enough," he said. "The Council wanted us to exist, but not to grow, not to reach our potential. They wanted us trapped in a cage, forever inferior, forever dependent. That's not survival. That's slow extinction." He turned to face the young Kresh directly. Humans have faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed us. Every time we had a choice: accept our fate or fight to change it. We always choose to fight. Not because we're aggressive, but because we refuse to accept limits others try to impose on us. But the cost, the Kresh said. So many died. 3 civilizations were destroyed. Was it worth it? Deho was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I think about that question every day. We did terrible things to win this war. Things that will haunt us for generations. But I know what would have happened if we surrendered. Humanity would have slowly faded away, our potential never realized, our dreams forever out of reach. And that was a death I couldn't accept. He looked back at the memorial. Every person named on this wall died so humanity could be free. Not free from laws or consequences, but free to choose our own path. Free to succeed or fail on our own terms. That's what we fought for. That's what they died for. Young Kresh considered his words carefully. Do you think humanity will always win? She asked. No, Deho said honestly. Someday we might face a threat we can't overcome. A species stronger, smarter, more advanced than us. And when that day comes, we'll probably lose. He smiled grimly. But we'll make them remember us. We'll make them pay for every world, every ship, every life. We'll show them that even in defeat, humanity never stops fighting. That's our legacy. Not that we're unbeatable, but that we're unforgettable. He turned to leave the gardens, then paused. Besides, we learned something the Council never understood. The best way to avoid war is to make everyone believe starting one would cost too much. The Council tried to control the galaxy through fear. We protect it by being the thing that nightmares fear. The young Kresh watched him walk away, processing what he'd said. She looked at the memorial, at the names of the dead, at the city that had risen from the ashes of war, and she understood. Humanity hadn't just won a war. They had changed what power meant in the galaxy. Not the power to control, but the power to resist control. The power to fight when fighting seemed impossible. The power to survive when survival itself was a rebellion. The Council had declared war to preserve their dominance. Instead, they sparked their own extinction and gave birth to a new galaxy. A galaxy where being strong meant defending the weak. Where advancement was celebrated, not feared. Where every species, no matter how young or small, had the right to reach for the stars, and humanity, as always, stood ready to defend that right against anyone who threatened it. The war was over. But humanity's watch had just begun.